Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Maine Woodland Owners. Maine Woodland Owners is a member organization based in Augusta. We provide expertise and resources for small woodland owners in Maine, and we've been an organization since 1975. And if you're not a member, we hope you do become a member after this program, of course. Going to our website at mainewoodlandowners.org, you can find information, and there is a button that takes you to our membership page where you can sign up and start receiving our monthly newsletters and all the other benefits of being a member. So one of the benefits of membership is being notified about our programs that often are free for the public, though we ask for a donation if you're not a member. So this is technically a free event for members. And today's topic is on the legislative session. As most of you know, we have started the 131st Maine Legislature. And as you all know, Maine Woodland Owners is very involved in the legislature during this period of time from January to June. So we have today Tom Doak, our Executive Director, who has been involved in this process for the past 18 years or so and has had other experiences with policy and government, and is a very familiar face in the legislature. And then joining him today is Karla Black. She's our Deputy Executive Director, and she is now taking on a lot of the tasks and the responsibilities in our role in the legislature as well, and the role we play to be the voice of Maine Woodland owners here as a one of the most important things we do as an organization. So I'm going to sit back and listen like everybody else. I'm going to pass the mic over to Tom. I just want to say one thing though. If you would like to ask questions or make a comment, we ask that you either raise your hand using the reactions button that's at the bottom of the screen, and you can click on the button that says raise hand. You can turn your video on and indicate that you would like to speak, and then you'll get called on. Or you can go ahead and just send a message in the text box, and then I will make sure that Tom and or Karla get that, we'll read that question out loud and answer that question. So, and thank you everyone for letting us know where you're calling from. It's great to see everybody. And I hope that you get, I know you'll get a lot of information. And of course, if you didn't get you have more questions after the program, Tom and Karla are available to help you out. And then I'm guessing we'll do another one of these programs later in the session because things happen and change and gets more exciting as you get closer to June. So at that, I will go ahead and pass over to Tom.
I'm gonna let Karla go first.
Oh, okay, great.
Go ahead, Karla.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Karla Black. I'm the Deputy Executive Director. I've been with Maine Woodland Owners just over a year. And we were involved in the legislative session last year when I first started, but this is really turning into my first real foray into being with the legislature in person. It was all by Zoom last year. So it's an interesting experience to get going. The legislature is the 131st legislature. They were sworn in early December, and they got off to a quick start. As you probably read in the newspapers, they were quick to pass a home energy and heating assistance bill. Since that time, it's slowed down a little bit. It's a very new legislature. I think we've estimated that as many as a third. Is that right, Tom?
At least, yeah.
A third of the members are new. So it's a learning process for many of the new members as they're getting assigned to their committees and getting acclimated to the work that they have ahead of them. I feel like Tom and I have been on a little bit of a roadshow since the beginning of the legislature has started. We've had an opportunity to meet with leadership and have met with Senate President Jackson as well as the Speaker Talbot Ross. and then the Senate minority leadership as well. And we do have an upcoming meeting with the House Republicans that will be talking to them. We've been impressing on them, introducing them really to Maine Woodland owners and impressing on them the issues that are important to us. We've been talking about things like Sunday hunting. As you know, that's a really important issue to Maine Woodland owners. We've been talking also about current use taxation programs and carbon and climate change. And you'll hear those themes again as we're talking about some of these bills that we're following this session. But we've had, I thought, what were very productive meetings. Board member Tom Allen joined us for those. And I thought they were exceptionally well received. And I thought folks were very interested in the work that we're doing and the priorities that we have. Continuing on with our roadshow, we've also been meeting with committees and introducing ourselves and having a bit of that same conversation, letting the folks know in front of the different committees that will appear, what issues that will be there to talk to them about. Yesterday was in the fisheries and wildlife where I was able to introduce Maine Woodland owners to the committee. We've also appeared in front of agriculture, conservation, and forestry. And we'll have the taxation committee and the state and local government committees coming up soon. So those are good opportunities for us to really get in front of the members on a personal level and introduce ourselves and have them have the opportunity to ask us questions, although they don't tend to ask a lot of questions in these introductory meetings. But I thought they were, again, I thought we were well received, and it was nice to be able to start putting some faces with names and the new members of the legislature. Let me see what else. The bills are starting to come out. It's been a little bit of a slow start with the bills that are being printed. We did receive a list of bill titles, and there are, I think, over 2,100 bill titles that were in the list. Unfortunately, they're just titles and they don't give us much information that is helpful other than just a general direction on what kind of bill it is. I think as of today, there were less than 400 bills that had actually been printed. So those are the ones that have the actual language now attached to them. So we're making a list and following certain bills that have been released already, but we're keeping close eye on that list of bill titles for when bills come out that are interested to Maine Woodland owners and landowners in general. We are following several different types of bills. There's different agriculture, conservation, and forestry bills. I thought I would give you just a couple of bill titles so you can appreciate how vague they are and having a hard time to figure out what the actual subject of the bill will be. But there are bills that are titled An Act Addressing Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, and that's all that it's called. So it doesn't give us much of a sense of what the bill will be about. There's another called An Act to Strengthen Maine's Agriculture, Food, and Forest Economy. Sounds good, but we'll see what the language is when the actual bill title, when the bill itself becomes printed. There are other bills that we're following related to climate. Again, some general, vague titles, An Act to Protect the Environment. There are, I believe, 2 bills in for constitutional amendments that would create a right to help the environment. We're interested in that, to see what those look like and what that entails, and to see if it will impact any of our interests here. There are other water-related bills that we're following. And then in terms of inland fisheries and wildlife related bills, there are ATV and snowmobile bills. There's one bill title in called An Act to Protect Landowners and Increase Safety on All-Terrain Vehicle Trails. I think that will be of interest to us when we see that bill language itself. One thing, as I'm sure you might expect, we've been expecting a Sunday hunting bill. I think you've read about it in our newsletter probably, that we've been expecting one. What we weren't expecting was 6. There are at least 4 and as many as 6 bill titles in the session dealing with Sunday hunting. There are a couple that are framed as youth bills, looking to get Sunday hunting in for younger hunters. So we'll have that conversation with the legislature again. I know Tom is an old hat at it. He can tell you the statistics for how many years he's been doing this and how many attempts there have been. Tom, do you want to tell us what those are?
Oh, I think it's 38 times in the last 43 years or something. It's I think that's the number. As I said, we were talking today and I said, there's really nothing new to say. I mean, every possible gyration has already been proposed, including some. I usually have a list in my testimony of some of the approaches and things like the third Sunday after the second Saturday or something. I don't know. And then north of the east-west highway, well, there's no east-west highway, but that was even one proposal. So you can see how kind of silly it gets. But you know, we're back. We didn't expect after the last session that we'd see this many, but
It's certainly disappointing after the commission that was, or the study that was commissioned by the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, that we were really confident was going to be the end of the conversation. The survey results from that came back and they were pretty clear that the majority of the general public doesn't support Sunday hunting, and that landowners in general, if Sunday hunting were to pass, landowners are likely to post their land. So given those statistics, we thought really, we were very confident that would be the end of the conversation, but of course it's not. So we'll be in front of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee again. I see a question: do bill sponsors attach their names to the Sunday hunting bills? Yes, they do. Whenever a bill is printed, it has a sponsor that has sponsored that particular bill, and sometimes has co-sponsors as well. I'm not recalling off the top of my head who the bill sponsors are for any of these. Tom, do you remember?
I think 5 of the 6, I think, are newer legislators and 1 from the committee from last year. But we can also, you know, I think even I think Richard Nass, former senator and House of Representatives, said we should publish the names of the people that are putting their names on these bills, and let our members tell them what they think of this ongoing, you know, waste of time and assault. And right, Richard, I'm looking at him, he's thumbs up. He said, yeah, let them know you don't appreciate it, and that might be helpful.
That'd be great. One other component to the Sunday hunting, again, if you've been reading along in our newsletter, you'll know that there's a lawsuit that was filed regarding the right to food amendment that was passed last year, I believe, a constitutional amendment that guaranteed the right to food. And the lawsuit was filed basically alleging that trumped the Sunday hunting, the prohibition on Sunday hunting, and the commissioner's ability to enforce that ban. The lawsuit was recently dismissed, I think in November, and that case has been appealed to the Supreme Court. And we're waiting for more information on what that appeal is going to look like, whether the court will hold oral arguments on that, and what that process will look like. I think the lower court decision was, it was a very short decision, basically saying that the parties plaintiffs had not, stated a claim upon which relief can be granted. And that was literally the substance of the decision. And we're confident that was the right decision. And I think we're equally confident that the law court will uphold that decision. So we're anxious to see where this will go and what the process will look like.
I thought the Attorney General office did a really good job of pushing back on and outlining why that was the Constitution Amendment does not trump that. So
yeah, they filed very strong arguments in support, and that's basically what the court relied on in making that decision. They relied on the arguments that were filed. So the court relied on the Attorney General's arguments in order to dismiss the case. We want to talk a little bit about some of the bills that we are working on and some that we're following. The first bill that I wanted to talk about was a bill that might be familiar to some of you. Oh, does the right to food amendment, right to food argument have any merit, or is it just a ruse? Well, I think if you ask us, we'd say it's just a ruse. I don't think that there was any legitimate argument, and that's basically what the court found, was that there had not been any facts stated upon which they could win their case. So I don't know, Tom, do you want to say any more about that, or that's my opinion?
I think the folks that have been pushing it have been clear that they've said they'll never give up. They'll do anything. They'll try anything. And I think that's what you're seeing is the idea that we'll file this lawsuit. And I actually was on public radio. I did a public radio with one of the principals behind it. And, you know, it's clear that, you know, that it's just become, I don't know what you would call it, a quest or something at this point. And, you know, regardless of the facts. And so it's going to continue, I think, until it becomes painful in some way. Probably the issue is there's no downside to people who keep doing this. So, you know, it's not like, you know, people, and I think probably some legislators at some point who keep putting them in probably should hear more from their constituents about why are we doing this.
John has a comment.
Hi, John.
Well, I think Tom and Karla know what my comment's going to be
I
about.
do know what your comment is going to be. Yes.
I am sick and tired of this Sunday hunting always coming up, and I've always indicated that I would post my property against all hunting if it were to pass, or I would post it so that only people with permission could hunt. So I was looking into the history of, how to post the property and how to properly market and things like that. And then I started to get interested in Maine's hunting law. And Maine has implied permission. In other words, a person doesn't have to ask permission to come on my property and hunt, fish. I don't believe they have to ask to snowmobile or four-wheel or anything on my property. And we're, I think, one of 22 states that has implied permission laws. And I think that those ought to be changed. I don't see why the onus should be on me as a landowner if I don't want people to hunt on my property to post the property. I think that people ought to ask permission if they want to come on my property and hunt, fish, or do any other activity. And I don't think I would ever refuse people that. I like to know that people are hunting, and when hunters do ask me, I ask them to park in my dooryard so that I know that they're out there, and also other people who are hunting will also know that there's another hunter out in my woods. It's not a huge area, so I like people to be aware of what's going on out there. But when I bring this up with my senator, people in the group are surprised that Maine has an implied hunting permission, and I think that law ought to be changed, frankly.
So, John, I'm glad the commissioner is hearing this because I think it's something that she's heard many, many, many times. And let me say the department and the commissioner have been extremely supportive of where we stand on this issue. So there are 4 times you need permission to come onto someone's woodland. Riding an ATV, putting a game camera up, putting a tree stand up, or land trapping. Those are the only 4. We have, as an organization, and I can tell you that there is a growing, it's very clear to me, I've seen it in the last 2 or 3 years, a growing, probably, and I think partly driven by this kind of harassment that landowners feel they're under, a growing position people, more and more people feeling, John, exactly like you do, to be honest with you. And I think that's unfortunate in ways that, because it changes things. But as an organization, we have always kind of taken the position, at least to date, that there's a compromise in place that says 6 days a week, you don't need the permission. The 7th day, you cannot go, period. And everybody knows that. And we've kind of supported that compromise. It is getting more difficult. I'm glad the commissioner's listening to this, because it's getting more and more difficult, frankly, to justify that. And say, why should you be able to come on your land with a firearm? Why without your knowledge? I mean, why? What's the logic? The bill that was pushed last year said you have to have permission to hunt on Sunday, written permission. Even the sportsmen opposed that idea because and the argument was, well, you only have to do it 1 day. You don't have to get permission 6 days. There is no logic to having to get permission 1 day and not the 7th. So it's been this compromise. It's been there a long time. We're not the ones who put 38 bills in 38 times in the last 43 years that require permission to access land, but it's getting closer and closer, frankly. And I know, John, you don't quite agree necessarily, but that's been the reason why we are where we are on our position. So,
Judy, did you want to jump in?
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm really glad that I was able to join the conversation today and listen in. I suspected you might be discussing some things like this.
oddly enough, yeah.
Yeah. I would just share that, someone earlier suggested that they reach out to their legislators and let them know they're unhappy to have the Sunday hunting bills proposed again. And I would say that I think really what you're talking about, changing the sort of assumed access or permission would be the most concerning thing for every sportsman and woman in the state. So I think that has tremendous opportunity to have the legislators think twice about putting in these Sunday hunting bills over and over again. It's much more troublesome than, although I think in the survey, Tom, you remember, but was it like 25 or 30% of landowners said that they would post their lands if Sunday hunting passed?
I think it was 40.
So it was a lot. I haven't looked at
A very high percentage, not quite 50, it was less than 50
Yeah.
that current, but a significant loss of access, right?
But total loss of access for the whole state without, by having to ask permission first would change the way that we do business in the state and the way everybody accesses the outdoors here. And so I think that is a really compelling reason to help us maybe subside some of these, these bills that are coming forward. I think some of the new legislators don't know. They haven't been part of it, but I do think that that's I know Sportsmen's Alliance, that's their biggest concern, as it would be for my agency.
And it may be time, we haven't really discussed at the board level, but it may be time to start putting bills in, not with the sense that gonna pass, but say, here's the flip side.
Yeah.
You can keep putting those bills in too. And and this would, and then you can defend yourselves about why you should be able to come on John's land with a firearm without his knowledge. And even hunting there's hunting at night there's a hunting season for certain things at night that you don't need permission from the landowner either. And I think that might change the dynamic. I see. Thank you, Commissioner, very much.
Rob?
Rob, yep.
I was just wondering, and maybe a little off topic, but it's like hunters now have access to a lot of information that they haven't in the past. There are these apps out that kind of take all the property lines and everything like that, and public lands, and it's all contained in these hunting apps. So for most hunters, I would think they know exactly where they are these days. I was wondering if there's any move to modernize you know, kind of hunters permission laws, you know,
In,
and incorporate that.
is it South Dakota or North Dakota? One of the Dakotas.
Mhm.
They actually, you can post your land electronically.
Right,
And so you can put it up, it's up on a publicly accessible site. And you post it like, you know, there's no more, you don't have to put signs up, you don't have to put purple paint, you can just
right.
post it electronically. I think you're gonna find other states follow that, you know, at some point. And you're right, the challenge is those maps are usually based on tax maps, which are
Oh, okay.
always very, you know, I've seen very few tax maps that are accurate.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes on the ground, you know, you can find a map, but how do you know where you are on the ground? And sometimes these boundary lines aren't marked, or
Mhm.
you've got 6 stone walls and you're trying to figure out which wall is this. So that's, you know, in other states where it's a felony to go on someone's land without permission, the lines are pretty clear because they better be, and you better know exactly where you're at because you can go to jail if you walk on someone's land with a gun. So there, the boundary lines are really important. In Maine, a lot of boundary lines are marginally marked, if at all. We could talk about this issue for a very long time, but I do hear the concerns in our membership, and I can tell you it is, you're not the only ones that feel like this, and we'll see how this session goes. I can tell you, I'm pretty confident that if a Sunday hunting bill passes, our next move will be absolutely a bill that says you must have permission 7 days a week, period. And push that. I mean, and really push it. And I've been clear to people, you want that, that's what you're gonna end up with. And you can decide how to defend that. And I don't know what the defense is. It's ironic because the groups that are opposing it are not opposed to hunting. This is not an anti-hunting bill. That's the challenge. You know, we support hunting, the Farm Bureau supports the people that are opposed to this are not opposing hunting. Anyway, I could talk about this for a very long time.
Are there any other questions or comments before we move on?
Just one more comment. I don't want people to think that I'm against hunting or that I want to post my property. That's not my point.
Yes.
It's just my point is that I like to know when people are hunting here. I've never refused anybody permission to hunt on my property. I like to be asked, but I'm not against people hunting on my land. And I would, even if they had if the law changed and they required permission, I don't think I'd refuse many people permission to hunt on my land. I'm all for hunting on my property, so, and other uses too.
You're definitely not alone, John, just so you know.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands, so I will move on. The next thing we wanted to talk about was bills that we have either put forward or are following ourselves, that we know about at this point, not the ones that are just bill titles, but one of the bills that we put forward, and you'll probably recognize if you've read our legislative updates in the past. It's a bill regarding the authority of municipalities to regulate timber harvesting. The bill was in last session, but never received a reference to committee, so which means it didn't get a hearing. So it died pending reference to committee at the end of the session. So it really didn't see the light of day for discussion. So we've put the exact same bill in this session. And what that bill does is there was a stakeholder group that had been assembled by the Maine Forest Service, which Tom, I believe, sat on, that reviewed and assessed an existing Maine law regarding municipal regulation of timber harvesting. So there's an existing law that regulates that. Many municipalities were not following the law, and the group was tasked with coming up with recommendations to bring them into compliance. And so this bill sets forth a time frame and a process for municipalities to come into compliance with the existing law. And it also clarifies I'm just looking at my notes here. It clarifies that a central registry for municipal ordinances maintained by the Forest Service applies to timber harvesting activities. So you'll see that bill, and you'll see us reporting on that one again. As we go forward. Tom, do you want to talk about the other two that we're
Yeah.
looking at, and the couple of others that we're following?
So we are always elected to discuss the tree growth tax law program at the legislature, because usually it's right behind Sunday hunting as the number of times it comes up in the legislature, but we have a bill going in. Our concern is that people that are in the tree growth tax law program that still want to manage their land, but also want to potentially manage their land for carbon or sell carbon credits, but also manage their land. We don't want them to be at risk of being removed from the tree growth tax law program. And so we are putting a bill in to protect those people that are in the tree growth tax law program, who are still going to be, managing their property, but a carbon doesn't prohibit them from being a sale of carbon that won't prohibit them from remaining in the program. And I think that's important if we're going to have people take advantage of some of the carbon programs that are out there. So that's our concern. We're working on the actual language and how that would work, but what we don't want to do is have people the law be interpreted, well, if you sold carbon, then you're not primarily using it for forest products, and out you go. And because the penalties are extremely high. So it's to protect landowners. So we're working on that one. And that one isn't out yet, but we've been working with some folks on that one. The other bill related to tree growth, which is not our bill, but it is a bill that the sponsor has talked with us about several times, is a bill to deal with housing. And the concern that the sponsor has is that land and tree growth, the penalties are so high to take land out that people can't do that to build a home. So he has a bill in that would say, if you're in tree growth, you can take 2 acres out of the program at the minimum penalty required by law. Instead of the way the penalties work in tree growth, there's 2 ways to do it, and it's the highest of the 2. It's always and the high one is always very high. So it is basically at a much reduced penalty. You could take 2 acres out if you build a home on it, and if the home is built within, I think it's 2 years or 3, I can't remember, but then you only have to pay the smaller of the penalties. There's some reason I think it has a merit for conversation, but it also is kind of changing the rules around tree growth. So I don't know how that will go, but there is some sense of it. We're working on what we might do with that. I'm not sure what our position is going to be quite yet on it, but that's the other tree growth bill that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any. I don't think, Karla, we're aware of any other bill that's going to really impact the tree growth tax law program.
I don't recall any.
We've had a bunch of them in the last several years, so we don't see a hostile tree growth bill, at least by title. The other current use taxation one we're working on is the open space program, and I served on the governor's climate council subgroup of the conservation working lands subcommittee, and we talked a lot about how to make the open space program more attractive to landowners, but also potentially also be something that someone who is interested in doing some carbon things that might benefit the climate and carbon could get a credit. So we're working with a group of folks. We were going to put a bill on our own, but there are others that we're working on it. So we're working with a group that's the Nature Conservancy is leading that, to look at how to adjust the open space, the percentages off your full taxes that you get for doing certain things. And that isn't quite ready yet either, but the open space law has not been reviewed. I don't know if it's been reviewed for the last 20 or 30 years, and unlike the tree bill tax law program that's every year. So it's well overdue anyway. So I think there's a chance to do something and make it more attractive to landowners who don't want to be in tree growth, but still want to keep their land undeveloped. Any questions on those? No. While I have the commissioner, I do want to talk about any deer permits, if that's okay. One of the, I think last year was the biggest deer harvest in the state of Maine's history, I think, right? And the year before that was like the third or something like that, right? Very, very high. So it's been real successful deer seasons the last couple of years. And the department did a lot of work on changing their anti-deer permit. Some people call it the Doak permit, but the anti-deer permit system. And which I think was one of the big reasons it was successful in the harvesting this year. Now, one of the things that did change impacted, is something that changed for landowners. So you can get more than one any deer permit now under the new system. But before, if you were a landowner that kept your land open for the public to use and didn't post your land, you got a priority for an any deer permit, and you didn't have to pay for it. This year with the change, everybody pays. I think except maybe the super PAC people, right? So we did get some comments back from people that said, gee, I keep my land open and I've always gotten for free. Now I have to pay for any deer permit. And I don't like that. I don't know how widespread that is. I did get like 3 or 4 calls right off the bat, and there's going to be a bunch of bills in. I'm not sure this is a huge issue. I think the department's willing to talk about how to handle it. The department's been very good about all these issues. I think people see it as a loss of a benefit for people that are providing access. And so for some people, they object to the idea of having to pay for a permit that was free before as a landowner. I don't know if there's any comments on that, or Judy, if you want to say anything more about anything about it, or correct me on anything, or.
No, I'd just say, I think, Tom, you're right that that this was the best harvest that we've had in our history, but even more than the total number of deer, was this the first time in a long time that we've come close to meeting our doe harvest objectives, which is one thing to harvest bucks, but that doesn't really help us with the population goals, right? So we need to be harvesting does. So particularly in southern Maine, I think the biologists were very pleased with how that process went. And I think there was a lot of discussion internally around how to handle the landowner permit and whether it should be free or the second deer should be charged like everyone else. And I think the department's position was there are so many groups that then follow asking for sort of to not have a fee, youths, landowners, lifetime license holders, the veterans. There's a lot of groups that kind of would try and get in on that. And the goal, or the department's position, is that this is a second big game animal. It has value. And since the money is all going directly back into buying and managing deer yards, we felt that it was important that everybody contribute. So that's how that came to be. And I can say that this year, the antlerless permit system generated just about $1 million, and we will spend that, but within the next 6 months on potentially a pretty large deer yard. So I think it's a good bang for the buck. You don't mind that play. I didn't intend that.
lot of dough
I'm not
involved.
that witty.
A lot of dough involved in that.
But yeah, the only folks that don't have to pay is the super PAC holders. If they get the super PAC, they get the permit through their super PAC. But keep in mind, they're paying close to $300 for the super PAC. So they're paying for it in the super PAC. But if they want an additional deer, they do have to pay for it. Or if they didn't get the permit, if they didn't win the permit through the super PAC lottery, which is just a small, 20% of the permits, then they do have to pay. So there's caveats there too. So it is a little complicated, but.
I think the issue is a perceived, at least a perception of a loss of a benefit that landowners had that they lost. And that's probably that's the issue that I feel. So
I would just propose that it's not, it's an additional big game animal. Let's frame it that way.
if they want more than one, right?
If they want more than one, right?
If they want more than, if they only
Yes.
wanted one now.
They're all set.
I'm sure there'll be more conversation on that, but it's not, I don't think it's gonna be a real big issue, and, but the department is aware of our concerns that, because I did express them from people I heard from. Anything on that, also on that one? Couple of other things that I expect to see, believe there will be a bill in, to regulate off-road riding of snowmobiling. John had mentioned the question about, talked about, you do not need permission about riding an ATV, I mean, a snowmobile, did I say ATV? I meant snowmobile. A snowmobile, you do not need permission to ride a snowmobile on someone's land. There's a concern about off-trail riding, people leaving trails and doing things they shouldn't be doing and going to places they shouldn't be. I think the Maine Snowmobile Association has worked with the department and is working on a proposal that would allow for enforcement if a landowner has some, I think it might work as the landowner has some signs says do not leave the trail, and they do leave the trail, then it could be a violation of snowmobiling laws. So and enforceable by any law enforcement officer. So it's to get at this, what is seen as a growing problem of people leaving the organized trail system and wandering off onto places that landowners don't want them. I suspect we'll see something about that. I suspect we'll be supportive of it. We won't be the lead that will take the snowmobilers to do this, but I think they recognize there's a growing problem there and want to deal with it. One thing that struck me yesterday, I was we were at a couple of hearings, and Senator Curry, who was in his second term, got up and said, and I hadn't quite thought of it this way. He said, I've been in the legislature 2 years. This is now my third year. And this is the first time I've actually testified on a bill in person. And it kind of struck me as, through the whole COVID, everything was done remotely. And many of these legislators had never met. Some of these people, many of them had never even met each other until the very end of the session when they got together. So it's a whole different dynamic this session about you're actually in person. Now you can testify remotely now. You can go on and can just like this and testify, but we're back to in person, and the legislators are, I think, required to be there in person. They can't do it remotely unless they have to have permission from the presiding officer to do it remotely, and you'd have to have a reason. You can't just say, I don't want to come in today, I'll just sit in front of the screen. Which I think is, frankly, I think that's a great rule. It's important those legislators be there in person, frankly. But it struck me as, we're kind of back to a normal. It seemed almost weird to sit in a room and get up and testify in front of people. So, one other bill I'll bring up is there's a dealing with fire. There's a bill that the Forest Service brought that would require that would ban outdoor burning permits on red flag days. These are the worst of the worst days, the highest fire danger. It's usually dry, very dry conditions, very windy conditions. There's been, Karla, 9 in the last 5 years, I think.
I think that's what they said.
Red flag days. But it is not illegal. A local fire department can decide to give the burning permits out. The Forest Service cannot ban, it doesn't have the authority right now to prohibit all burning on those days. So they're asking for that permission, which makes sense. But then it was interesting, some of the agricultural people say, well, we need to burn the blueberries certain times, and that would impact the blueberries. And I'm not sure why we're burning on a red flag day, but anyway, because that seems like that's the greatest liability, but it was just kind of interesting. The other part of that bill was interesting. They said there's no definition of a campfire. You can have a campfire on your own property without permission, but there's no definition of a campfire. So somebody can build a bonfire and stick a hot dog on a stick and say, this is my campfire. And it doesn't matter how big it is. It's like, this is my, yeah, I'm toasting my hot dog on my campfire, which is 12 feet tall. So they're working to put a definition of campfire in to say, you know, it's like a fire 3x3 is a campfire. Anything above that is debris burning, and you need a permit. So it seemed like seems like that's reasonable, but even that will, I think, not be an easy bill. So, Karla, anything else that we want to bring up here? If you have concerns about any particular bill, we're happy to talk to you anytime. We can get the list out of people that as soon as we see the Sunny Hunting bills, we'll just produce the list and say, here are the sponsors of these bills. And if you want to contact your legislator, here's how you do it.
I think we'll post them to our website, right?
Yeah. Richard Nass is always, Richard, you've always told me you get.
I have a question for
Yeah.
Karla, if I can. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Karla, earlier in the program, talked about the introductory meetings with the various committees, and she mentioned state and local. My state rep is a newbie. He's new, and he's on state and local. When are you going to meet with these people? I want to make sure I tell him, be there and pay attention. Is that happening?
I'm meeting with them on Thursday at 2 o'clock.
Thursday at 2. All right, I'll be on his tail. And John mentioned that he had talked to his senator. My question to John is, did he talk to his state representative too? Does he even know who it is? John?
Yes, I do. My senator is Nicole Grohowski.
Yeah.
who I'm very much in favor of, and I can't think of the representative's name, but I do know him. He's in Ellsworth.
I think for all of us, we need to be talking to these people. If you're a landowner and you don't know who they are and you're not talking to them, then it's your own fault if this stuff happens that's bad.
I agree.
John had forwarded us, I think it was John, you had forwarded us the conversation you had with your senator, and we actually went back to the senator and explained our position, you know, why Sunday hunting is such a problem for landowners. So I think you saw that, but that was a good lead in, frankly. She has a constituent that has a concern about Sunday hunting, and we were able to also reach out to that senator because you had kind of tipped us off that way and gave us an in to bring that up to her. So, Richard, you've always told me that as a former legislator, if you get 3 or 4 phone calls, you pay attention. It doesn't take 100 for you to pay attention, right?
Right. Now's the time to prep them, basically. Call them and tell them what you're interested in, and don't be afraid to call them back. Just don't monopolize their time, but call them. Tell them who you are and why you're calling them, and do it frequently. I can remember there was a farmer up in Cornish. He had a big dairy farm, and he used to call me every Sunday evening. We had a fairly nice conversation, but he was very specific about, and he wasn't demanding and he wasn't nasty. He just basically told me what he was interested in. He listened to me, basically. It was wonderful. And so I would urge everybody to do that. Now's the time to prep your state rep, state senator, tell them what you're interested in.
The couple of times we don't often ask for help. The one thing I'll say, we don't often ask our membership. We're not one of these organizations that everything is a crisis, to be honest with you. So if you are a member and you get a request from us as an alert that please contact your legislator, that means we really need your help. This is a really big issue, and please, that's why we don't ask you to do it all the time. But when we do that, that means either we're concerned or we don't think we've got this where we want it, or we need to make clear that, either this is a great idea or this is a really bad one. And most of the time we're fighting things off, to be honest with you, but that's the signal usually that this is a serious matter. And it really helped us last year. The one alert, I think, was the Sunday hunting one. And these were individual message, we don't do this, here, sign here, and this is the because the legislators don't care, they get 50 of those, it's the same wording. We got personal, individual messages to these legislators, and they responded to that. They knew. We didn't have as many as the robocalls, but we had individuals, and they knew those were real people that were writing to them, and that was very helpful in the final discussion. I mean, to the point where the people that were pushing it didn't want to even have a public vote on it, because they knew they didn't want to put some of these legislators didn't want their name on, didn't want it to be a recorded vote. So that was good. Jen, you're still there? Anything, Jen, that we need to, we haven't missed anybody, I hope?
No, I don't see anybody else looking for a chance to speak.
Good.
This is a good time. Anybody else would like to ask a question, get some clarification?
Well, we appreciate that. We will provide updates on our website. Our newsletter will have updates every month. We'll have some updates on our website on bills that we're working on, copies of all our testimony. And then, when, if needed, alerts. So
I should say that our website does have links to the legislature's page and the Senate's page. And that's where you can actually, if you don't know who your representatives are, you can find them on those pages. So we try to provide all the links that you would need to get the information that you need. So if one thing is, if you want us to start communicating directly with your representative and you wanted to have a little bit of information to feel like you spoke in a way they could understand, and our message was consistent, you're welcome to give our office a call or email Tom. But what we want to do is make sure that web page is completely filled with information and content that you can use to communicate. So
it's also helpful if you do talk to your legislator on an issue that we've asked you to respond. If you just let us know that you did, then we know. I can tell you, I've done this before on tree growth, and I can remember Richard Staff knows the story. We put out an alert. The next morning I walked in the State House, I was a tree growth alert, and all of a sudden I had these legislators coming up to me and saying, what in the world is going on in the tree growth tax law? My phone's been ringing. And so that was really helpful. I mean, that was a response there. So if you hear from somebody, if you have a conversation about, it's great to know, because now we know that they've heard from a constituent. And that's helpful. That's helpful when we're talking with them, when they say, I don't hear anything. Well, we know they have heard. So that's helpful to us. Okay.
Rob, was your hand up? No, I thought I saw Rob's hand up. Okay.
Well, good to see some very familiar names. So thank
So
you.
probably we'll try to do this again in late March.
I think another month, probably things will be really cooking.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks everybody.
Hey, thanks all.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.